welcome everybody to another episode of the Most Important Conversations. I'm joined here today with Bill Schuffenhauer. Bill, how are you doing today?
Awesome, Chad. I'm doing so good. Funny enough, as we jumped on, is like long time no see.
Yeah. Well, Bill, just in full transparency, everyone, Bill is working with TMIC and helping us on the ground as part of the ground team, building and pushing forward what we're pushing out into the world. And one of the things that we want to do as part of this podcast is, of course, we're featuring people from all walks of life and in different areas who are sort of leading and at the front edge of global transformation and entrepreneurship. And, we're covering all these different topics from entertainment to business to health and wellness to relationships. And all of these different topics are getting covered from the perspective of what is at the source of being human. And we wanted to cover also the people that are on our team because they're very accomplished people and they are here for a reason and they've lived and breathed the experience that we're promoting and that we're advocating for people to engage with around the world. So Bill is one of those people. And Bill, you're a three-time medal Olympian, correct? For the Olympic
Three-time
team,
Olympian,
U.S. Olympic team?
silver medalist, won Olympics.
Okay.
And then plethora of worlds and nationals and all that other fun stuff. But one Olympic Games. Well, one Olympic medal from three Olympics. Yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay, three Olympic Games. And so anyway, being an athlete, let's just dig into it here. Being an Olympic athlete is not an easy thing to accomplish. And it requires a certain amount of training and focus and commitment and devotion and effort. And I thought that would be a good place for us to start today because, share from your own lived experience, obviously, but I'm looking around at what's going on in society today, and I'm seeing a lot of complaining going on, and I'm not really seeing a lot of effort, because if you're complaining, you're not putting in the effort in. So let's just start with that. Let's talk about, and we talk about all this stuff in the whole life architecture work that we do and everything. But, when I think about Olympic athletes or any professional athlete at that level, doesn't just have to be the Olympics. You got to put in some long, tough days. You got to have discipline. You don't have the ability to complain. You just wouldn't be an Olympian if you complained, right? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chad. You're 100% right. The reality is you and I see the same thing too, right? In society, we all see it. All you have to do is jump on a Facebook and watch somebody's post or Instagram or a TikTok and you see that, people complaining about their life or their situations and so on and so on. But you really like, hit the nail on the head. The reality is like training for the Olympics and maybe anything that you want to be really, really good at. You want to be the top 1% at whatever it is that you're doing. It is a full-time commitment. That was my job. That was my career. That's what I lived, eat, and breathe. That's what I dreamt. That was like as you say, that was my architect 100%, right? And you're right. You don't have time to complain about little things here and there because all those complaints will just stack up. And when they stack up, you start going backwards instead of moving that needle forward in any way, shape, or form, right? And plus, like your coaches, if you have good coaches, right, they're not going to allow you to sit there and whine and complain about stupid stuff because it just doesn't serve you at all, right? If you do something in practice, if you do something in a competition, if you do something in a big race, right? Yeah, you can be emotional about it and not like it. And maybe, I could have done better or whatever that is. But to put energy, like real energy into complaining about that situation, it's not going to serve you. It's not going to get anywhere, right? You have to just take, whatever happens, okay, absorb it, work with your coach. Hey, how do we take the next step to overcome what just happened, right? And
so basically we can frame this interview, this conversation that we're having right now through the theme of the mind of a champion. And I think everyone who's listening and watching to this, deep down, everybody, well, let's flip it. Nobody wants to be a loser. Everyone wants to be a champion, right? So what does it take to actually be a champion? And so we started talking about how there's a lot of grievance going on out there, complaining going on out there. I mean, we're not seeing in society right now, en masse, generally speaking, there's always exceptions, many exceptions, I know, but we're not seeing champion culture. We're not seeing a bunch of champions right now. But that doesn't mean that we can't correct course and that we can't help people kind of, tap into the essence of that source, that power, that champion within them. And so step one, everyone, if you're listening, is, at some point you got to stop pushing the complain button and take a step back. I remember I was watching, there was that documentary that came out about Arnold Schwarzenegger's life. And it's on Netflix, I think. And so if anyone hasn't seen that, very good documentary. There's this one scene in it where I'm trying to remember. I think it was like he didn't get picked for a movie or something like that. Or maybe it wasn't that he didn't make number one in Mr. Universe. There was something that he was going for that he didn't get. And anyway, he was honest and transparent about it. He was at home in his apartment in LA, and he was like crying, that night, because he was so fixated on attaining that goal. He cried for a little bit, and then he said, I got up the next morning and I looked in the mirror and I said, okay, you've had a cry, you little baby. Now pick it up and get going, get your ass in gear here. Right. So yeah, it's not about that. We all have to feel. Part of, emotional sobriety, when we teach that in the whole life architecture work, is to embrace our feelings, to feel them deeply, not repress them, but also you don't want to be wallowing in, especially if you're feeling is what we call a negative emotion. You don't want to be wallowing in that. You're never going to attain champion level from that place. Yeah. And so what else can you say about so there's discipline, there's no complaints, you went through a tough period in your life when we first got connected and with TMIC and everything like that. And you had a choice to make. And I think there's a lot of listeners and viewers who may be dealing with that. The economy's tough right now. Maybe you don't like the political situation. There's lots to complain about. And at some point, everyone is faced with, I can either continue to complain or worse, and you were at the or worse part, or I can do something about it. Why don't you talk a little bit about that story and how you kind of pulled yourself out of that?
Yeah, and that's the reality of the whole complaining stuff too, right? So many people get caught up into it because they hear one person complaining about something that they recognize what they're talking about. Oh, hey, I know, right away they're an expert. So they join the conversation, and then it just starts spreading like wildfire. And, for me, when you and I met, I was coming off of, I wasn't coming off of anything at the point in time. I was deep into it. I retired from competing as an Olympian in 2010. I didn't have a game plan set up for myself post-Olympic career. And that led me down a very, very, very dark 8.5 year path, and I'm very transparent. I talk about this all the time as well. Depression, addiction, alcoholism, suicide, victim mentality. I couldn't pay, I was making $15,000 a month and I couldn't pay my bill. I was digging in my couches to get food to not only feed myself, but feed my pets, which I had no business doing that either. Couldn't afford pets because I was blowing money on stupid stuff. So when I retired, I got caught up in that world of complaining and victim mentality. Why is it not working for me? Who's going to help Billy the Olympian now that I've competed and done all this thing? Where's my reward? And that just led me down a really bad path. And those practices and those behaviors and those thoughts that I had in those 8.5 years are completely opposite of what I learned to become an Olympic champion, right? I retired, had a loss of identity, and tried to reinvent the wheel, if you will. The reality is all I had to do is keep utilizing the same practices I did to achieve Olympic status, but I didn't. And when you and I met, I was pretty much at my end. I'd been whining and complaining and blaming everybody for the lack of success that I had after the Olympics. And when you and I met, I was just like, man, when you asked me about, hey, I'm going to do this online thing on Zoom, it's called The Most Important Conversation. It's kind of like life coaching type stuff. If you're interested, inside, I was like, who is this guy? This is so life coaching and business, like so stupid. What is this stuff?
Mm.
But the reality for me is I had nothing else. I had
Right.
no other outlets. I had no other resources. Everybody had given up on me because of my attitude had gotten so bad and my behaviors had gotten so bad. And the first conversation that we had that I recall was you just threw it out there. Hey, do you lead a life by default or by design? And I love being able to tell you this now, right? Because what's happened since then.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, what in the freak is this dude talking about? Life by design or by default? And of course you continue with the conversation. I literally remember myself sitting in my living room back up in Ogden with my computer, looking around at my room, thinking, who is this dude? We just got off the phone talking about like your technology that we're going to try and bring it into the Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And you're like, well, if you lead life by default, right, your life is probably not going the way you want. You're probably not happy. Maybe you're depressed. You don't like your job. Your relationships are struggling, what have you. But on the other end, if you live a life by design, everything's going really, really well for you. And I was like, okay, mine's the first one times 1,000. Like
Mm-hmm.
my life sucks. I'm ready to give up. Like give up, give up. And I've begged God, I've begged the universe, I've begged friends and family members to help me out, and nothing was working. And then the next thing I recall, you're like, well, if you lead life by default, it's not too late to take accountability for the architecture in which you created, declutter all the negative things that are not serving you within that architecture, and rebuild it by design.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you may have mentioned it like a couple of times to really hit the point home of what you were saying. And that was like, for the first time in like 9 years at that point in time, I was like, oh my gosh. Kind of like that show, Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a
Yeah,
chance,
yeah, yeah.
right? And I was so miserable. I was in such a bad space, and not that I like to admit it, but I was blowing $400, $500, $600, $700 a day at the bar
Wow.
when
Yeah.
I was supposed to be running my company and taking care of my kids and taking care of my family. But I was using every excuse in the book that why it wasn't my fault, right?
Yeah.
And so, um, when we started getting off that call, for some reason I'm remembering you talking about, go have a conversation with yourself in the mirror, right? And you and I didn't even know you didn't even know how bad my life was at that
No, I
point,
had no clue.
you
Yeah.
know? And I shut the computer, tears started coming down my eyes because I saw a light of hope in this architecture conversation you're talking about, design or default. And right away I was like, okay, I'm going to take 100% accountability that my life is absolutely horrible. It is 100% by default, but now I have to try and take accountability for how I got here.
Mm-hmm.
And when I closed the computer, I walked into my bathroom and I started staring at myself in the mirror until I saw myself for the first time in 46 years at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was weird. I'm not gonna lie, it was really, really weird. And I was like, I've never been in this situation. What do I do? Like, I'm seeing myself in the mirror, but it's me, but it's not me.
Yeah.
And I just started having a conversation with myself and saying, hey, listen, your life is 100% by default. But if we want to, we can recreate this by design, but no one's going to come save you. God's not going to come save you. The universe, your neighbors, whoever is not going to come save you. The only person who's going to save you is the guy that you're staring at in the mirror right now.
Mm-hmm.
And tears just started rolling down my eyes. And that's, after that first conversation, I was so engaged in what you had to say and what you brought to the table from TMIC. I literally that next day, I started like just decluttering everything. Like, as an Olympian, like I'm about massive, powerful actions.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm in on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm 100 on the really bad scale. And if I'm going to fix any of this, I have to utilize my skill set of what I learned as an Olympian and go full force all the way, powerful actions. And I had just spent, I don't know how much money filling my entire house with brand new furniture because I thought that was going to help with my mental health,
Mm-hmm.
all these other stupid things. And the next day I literally posted everything on KSL, which is a
Wow.
local thing here. And I was giving stuff away. I had, a $15,000 Ralph Lauren bed. I think I ended up selling it for like $500. I didn't even care. I was just
Wow.
like, get rid, like Chad said, declutter my architecture.
Mm,
Even though I still don't know this guy, I got nothing else,
yeah.
right? And that's where so many people, we get into this space where we feel like we have no hope, we have no opportunity because the architecture in which we created is so dark and dismal, right? And I was like, I've got to do it. I've got to go for it. So literally sold everything I had, got rid of my apartment, my car, all my furniture, got rid of my pets. I think at some point in time I had 100 dress shirts. I'm like, I don't wear all of them. Literally just started getting rid of stuff that I was attached to because I thought that's what was helping me deal with my mental health and issues I was having. Moved from an hour away, started surrounding myself with more influential people, which happened to be a bunch of business and life coaches,
Hmm.
which I still didn't even understand it at that point in time because again, coming from the athletic coaching world, I was like, who needs a life coach? Who needs a business coach, right? And just started like,
Incidentally, that's the same thing that people will say when they go to the gym. I don't need a trainer. I'm just going to go lift the machines,
right,
and all kinds of injury or things that don't work, non-effect happens. So it's the same thing. It's
yeah,
throw the word coach out. We all need someone who has the ability to objectively look at our life. Now, not just anyone. You don't pick someone up
yeah,
on the street and say, "What do you think about me?" Right? But someone who's kind of got some training, some experience, some ability to understand human nature, human psychology, and that kind of thing. We all need someone who's got that, and life experience and wisdom to be able to look at us and give us insight. And none of us are outside of that. So
yeah,
call it life coaching. It's kind of become a thing. I don't really resonate with that either, but it's just mentoring, or it's, people speaking into each other's lives. And I think that we're in a situation in society right now where people are so isolated, so insulated in their own little bubble, in their own world. Social media has made it even worse. Who's speaking into your life? Who
right,
is giving you honest feedback and data input? Because all of us, just the nature of our brains, we are all blind to what we become subconsciously habituated, conditioned to. And so, for those of you who are listening to Bill's, story here, reflect on your own. Your life is everything that it is the culmination and the result of all of the choices that you've made, largely unconscious, largely from your conditioning. So you have to begin by taking responsibility that if you're blaming your life on other people or circumstances, you're not there yet. And you're not, by the way, going to get out of it. The
yeah,
only way out of it is to look in the mirror and say, I've created this life and I can uncreate it and recreate something else. That's
yeah,
the difference between the life by design versus life by default. If you're complaining about life, where we started the conversation today, you're living a life by default. I promise you, you're living a
yeah.
life by default.
No, 100%. And that's, that was literally the hardest thing for me to do was taking the 100% accountability, right? And it is for everyone else, right? Because it's really easy for me to be like, oh, that was Chad's fault. Like I was part of it, but Chad's actually the one who's responsible for this, or that Lisa, she's the one who did that, right? You hear it all the time. And again, you see it on social media. But when I was able to literally take 100% accountability, that's when the needle really started to move. And it took me probably a good year to understand what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like, I mean, I find myself taking accountability for stuff that I'm, oh, that, yeah, no, I don't actually have to take accountability for that, right? But what I would like to people to, out there to think about is think of all the things right now in your life that you might be blaming someone else for, someone else's fault or whatever. Take those situations and find a way to be accountable for those. And what I try to remind people, not that you're being at fault or you're at blame, but I want you to see it through their eyes on why it's happening, because
Mm-hmm.
you're still involved one way or another,
Yeah.
right? You're still responsible somehow for that situation, whatever reason. But when you're able to take 100% accountability for all the things in your life and you understand what that means, you're attaching yourself to like nothing,
Yeah.
right? And it's so relieving. I recall back then, before you and I met, I was begging anybody in the world, universe, God, whoever it was, just to give me one day and even an hour of one day in the year. Just give me one good day for 1 hour of the year. And now that I've done all this work and recreated my architecture by design, my days are freaking awesome almost every single day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it goes back, and don't get me wrong, like I still have to check myself in if I'm complaining about something. Like there's some times where I'm like, you know what, that was wrong. I apologize. And I've had to walk up to people and apologize to them. Hey, I'm so sorry. I was complaining about that. Had nothing to do with you. I'm taking responsibility for that, and I apologize. So I'm not saying I'm perfect, like none of us are. But when you are able to start making that a practice of your life day in and day out, like you can just move through life so much more seamlessly, and you can attract all the things, people, places, and things that you want in your life.
Yeah.
And we make it sound easy, but there's a lot of work that's gone into where we're at and what we're doing too.
Well, that's an interesting. So, a couple things I want to pick up on there. First of all, for people listening or watching, if you are, no one gets to be a victim or a bystander in life, and we have a lot of victims and bystanders right now in our society. What's going on right now? We have a lot of bystanders, people saying, well, that's not my responsibility, and so they're just watching stuff go down, stuff that they know shouldn't be going down in their neighborhood, in their community, in their schools or whatever, but you're not stepping up and actually addressing it and being part of creating the solution, which usually begins with a conversation with somebody. Or you're living life through the lens of a victim, and being a victim where life happens to you. And so again, you're not taking responsibility if you're like, well, no, that's just happening to me, right? Things happen, but they're not happening to you. It's not personal. And your job is to see, what can I do to step in to take some accountability and responsibility to shift the trajectory of that thing that's happening, not just sitting back complaining and being a victim about it, right? So that's an important thing for people to really get. It's just a mind shift and a frame. And then the other thing I want to point out is what you were talking about is the effort. Yes. People need to rethink and re-relate themselves to effort in life. And the way I like to look at it is, if you think about your own life, the only time that something has ever been completely amazing and that you felt totally alive is when you've put effort to accomplish something and you've accomplished it, right? In fact, I would say in most of those circumstances, it's not even the end product or the accomplishment, but it's only in that moment that you look back at all of the work that you put in. So like when you won the Olympic medal, right? Sure, that moment is great, but sometimes I almost find those moments are anticlimactic once you reach them, because you're looking back and you're like, no, it was actually the journey of all the work and the effort and the grinding it out where I was most alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally, that probably, I'm guessing, may have been one of the things that contributed to the tip over the edge that you went through. So you'd won the medal, you'd got the notoriety and all this stuff. And then I'm guessing it's like the high was so high, now what? And so you get into this identity thing, right? I mean, is that kind of what happened?
No, you're 100% right. And that's where, like, I, several years ago, created one of my many quotes, that plan your race your plan, but be prepared for the unknowns, right? And I planned my race and raced my plan to perfection up until I retired. And that was unknown, and I didn't plan for that. So yeah, I was way high up on top of the mountain, 3 Olympic silver medalist. I had fulfilled my story that we had talked about years and years ago, to change my stars and be this kid who came from nothing, from the streets, homelessness, foster care, to compete in my own hometown and win an Olympic medal, not even a block away from where I used to eat out of garbage cans. Everything literally went perfectly to plan until I retired. And it was like literally like dropping myself off a 30,000-foot cliff. And like, now what do? I don't have the tools and resources. I feel lost. I need to recreate myself. I need to redo this. I need to figure, like, it was such a dark, horrible space, and now, now that I've done the work several times over, that's what I appreciate, is exactly what you just said. It's the journey,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, it's been great to, walk downstairs and grab my Olympic medal and show people and share people. But there's so many more stories and experiences over the years that were greater than the actual medal itself. It's unbelievable. And it's the same thing with my life now. Like, my journey since you and I met to where I'm at now. Yes, it's great that TMIC is going well. Yes, it's great that the technology companies and everything else is going well. But the journey in between all of that, that's the real story, right? And
Yeah.
that's what makes me excited to share what we do and share what I do with everyone else, because it is what it is. We see so many people, more stuff that I learned from you, that are full of near wins all day, every day, right? Everybody wants something right now and they want to put no effort into it. In fact, the other day I saw a post on social media, and there's this big long line of cartoon people that are like, there's a sign above and it says, trade your old golf club in for a new one. And the other line, which doesn't even exist, there's a guy sitting there that says, come take golf lessons, right? Nobody's in the line to get lessons. Everyone's saying it's the club. It's not them. They don't want to take accountability for their lack of ability. It's the club, right? It's the circumstances around them. No one wants to look in the mirror and be like, you know what? I'm going to take accountability for my own life because it sucks or whatever it is, and figure out, how do I move the needle forward without trying to replace my job with a completely different job or whatever. Just go get training, go get a coach, go get a mentor, right? And learn. I mean, there's a saying that we talk about that has been around forever, and I'm sure there's lots of them, right? Give a guy a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a guy a fish, he'll eat forever, right?
Right.
And the reality, that's kind of like what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? If you really want to change who you are and you want to change your environment and your architecture, go learn how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other, I love aphorisms and all of these types of sayings, because they're so true and to the point. And, there's this other one, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Right. And you are not, no one escapes their life. It's their life because you're in it. So you're bringing your life wherever you go. And yet we continue to look outside of ourselves to blame for the way our life looks, but we're the common denominator. Right. And there's other people who have the same circumstances that we may have. And they're taking it on, and they're transforming their life, and they're not being a victim, and they're going to get a totally different result. And so the mind of, framing our little talk here around sort of like the mind of a champion, it's taking accountability, it's taking responsibility, it's knowing that you have the creative power to design and create a life that you want. I remember hearing years ago I read about this woman in New York City. She was a single mom, a Black woman, single mom, working a crap job, 2 kids, always wanted to get a law degree. And somehow within the tenacity of her life, decided that she was going to get it come hell or high water. So she would go to work at her job, come home, she would feed the kids dinner, neighbor would watch the kids, put them to bed while she went to night school and got her law degree. And she became a lawyer. And then she quit at the grocery store, wherever it is that she was working, and started working for a law firm, and completely transformed the life of herself and her family.
Yep.
Now, was it easy? Hell no. You imagine working at a grocery store all day, going home to feed the kids. Thankfully, a friend next door was willing to just sit in the apartment and be there. And then you're at night school all night. And then you come home and you maybe grind out 6 hours of sleep, and you're back at the grocery store. 4 years at least, right? What is a degree these days? So no, it's not easy if you want to do it, but you can either complain and nothing will change. It'll just get worse. Or you can actually look yourself in the mirror, like you said you did, and decide that you are going to be the architect of your life. And and that's going to mean, as it always will, letting go of some things. You were talking about, there's the physical things, right? You decided to take massive action and start selling, expensive furniture that you had bought where you had tried to fill that hole. But sometimes it also means leaving relationships, geographically moving, doing things that, yes, are new and are maybe uncomfortable, but it's only by doing those things that you're going to be able to get to a place where you get like a level of emptiness in your life where you can build inside of and build on top of. So you got to declutter your life, get rid of the noise, get rid of the stuff that just was there because by default you let it into your space. At the time you were taking no responsibility for what you let into your mind, your mental diet, for what you let into your energy space, physically, who was around you, where you were, who you were hanging out with. Another aphorism, you become like the 5 people that you spend the most time with, right? We hear these things in the culture. We love to like them as memes, on social media. And we all agree with it. But I've always been someone who's like, I'm actually going to test that thing. Is that true? Like, why do we say it? If we're not going to live by it or test it, then we shouldn't say it, And so here's what I know. Meme culture has been a huge thing. Maybe it's changing now, but on social media, everyone's always like, oh, here's a good one, sharing memes. My question is, are you just sharing memes or are you living by those damn things? And are you, incorporating them into your life? Most people can't say they live by that stuff.
I would agree 100%. I'm in this moment right now because I'm getting further and further away from even wanting to be on social media. Yes, I understand it helps with business and so on and so on, but I look at like a lot of people I know here locally and realistically around the world, right? That are posting these memes. They'll take a Michael Jordan and post it a saying on there with Michael Jordan, and I'm like, you don't even know anything about that. Like, I know you, like, I know what you do day in and day out. You don't practice that, right?
No.
And I'm holding back because I don't want to be that person that's like starts calling people out because I'm like, oh, maybe it's like a beginning for them. But again, like there's so many people, it goes back to the near wins. Oh, if I post something inspirational on social media, I'm good. No, you're not, because you're not practicing it. You're just talking about it.
Yeah.
And back when I was growing up, we always talked about it. There's people that talk the talk and there's people that walk the walk. And so which one are you, right?
Yeah.
When you really do an AAR of your life, where you're at right now, after action review of your life, who are you? And are you showing up, truly showing up? Are you implementing these practices? Are you going to a Tony Robbins event and actually really engaging with that information, a Jack Canfield event, a TMIC event, whatever it is that you're doing? Are you actually taking that stuff, putting it within your architecture and rebuilding yourself by design? Or are you just the guy or the girl that's like talking about, well, Michael Jordan said that you miss 100% of the shots you never take? That's true, but are you actually doing that in life? And are you willing to do it, right?
Yeah.
It kind of goes, we're kind of falling into that realm of talking about failure and stuff, right? Which is just a part of your architecture of success. It's how you get better, right?
Yeah.
But then again, you'll see people that post these memes one week, and then the next week they're complaining about the same thing that they posted from last week.
Yeah.
So what are you really doing here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this goes back to like, from my world of sports. If you want to be an Olympian and you want to be a great Olympian, this has to be your architecture and practice day in and day out. One of the other things when we talk about architecture that you taught me as well is like, you can't build an architecture of new within the walls of the old one that never worked.
Right.
Right. And I see so many people doing that, and it kind of drives me insane because I just want to like shake them and be like, look what you're doing. The solution is so simple. It's right in front of you. Stop doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
it reminds me of a friend growing up. His father wanted us to, we were like, I don't know, 14 or 15 or something. And they had this old rickety rotting fence around the house. Right. And he's like, well, can you guys go out and paint the fence? And so I went out there with him. We had a bucket of white paint, wanted it painted white. And I'm looking at this fence, and I grab one of the parts of the fence and I start moving it, and it literally crumbled, and like the wood crumbled, and I was just holding onto latex paint. I said, dude, your freaking fence is like literally rotten. Like, painting this, you're just painting on top of paint with a bunch of sawdust inside, basically. It's barely a fence, Anyway, he's like, oh, I'm not going to argue with my dad. Let's just paint the damn fence. So, so we literally painted a rotting fence with a fresh coat of paint. And it was literally, the paint was the only thing holding it up. And it's a metaphor, I think, sometimes for people's lives. We may have lives that are rotting inside, literally rotten inside. And instead we keep dressing it up with the paint, all of the extra stuff, not making driving nice cars or wearing nice clothes or none of that wrong. But if you're rotten inside, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's just going to sink you deeper. And you can have all that stuff, but have it from a place of, as they say, come by it honestly, like take responsibility and accountability for your life, design your life, attain success in a way that aligns with who you authentically are. And sure, if you make a lot of money and you want to drive I'm a big believer in driving nice cars and things like that. I think you should enjoy life, but do it from a place of, from a place of total authenticity and alignment with who you are. Yeah. And build yourself into a champion, become powerful. There's no power in being a victim. There's no power in complaining. And that's the thing I find so disappointing when I look at our culture right now and kind of what's going on, whether it's political or in business or whatever. There's just a whole lot of powerless people posing as powerful people, but they're not powerful because they're just whining and complaining about everything.
It goes back to that, one of those sayings, kind of combination what you're saying, right? Slapping lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, well, we did that on a fence, and it right? Didn't work very well.
And and it's interesting too, right? Because I, back in the day, post my retirement, I'd see all these people being really successful, all these people acquiring things and nice cars and all that stuff. And I was too, just not in the right way. I mean, I drove, $150,000 Mercedes, realistically couldn't afford it. But I'm going to say this, and if people want to come after me, it's totally fine. I was like the ghetto kid with the fake chains, pretending to be like this big baller and showing up. And in the reality inside, I was the fence, right? I was the fence, and I would sit there and complain to the universe, again, to God, whoever, why is this not happening for me? I competed in 3 Olympics. I won an Olympic medal for our country. I should be handed everything I want on a silver platter now. Well, we saw how well that served me for 8.5 years, literally right. About lost my life. And now that I've done the work, and I'll continue to do the work until I am like 6 feet under, I will still continue to do what I do and practice it day in and day out. And now all the things that I want in life are literally just showing up on my doorstep. And, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I had this conversation with myself. I was like, so what's the difference? And the difference is I've been doing the work. I don't complain about my life. I take accountability for it. I have goals. I surround myself with positive, influential people. I don't hold on to the ones that I thought were my friends, right? They just, again, you can't have those two worlds and expect to find success. And so the question was like, okay, why didn't I have it back then? Is because I wasn't doing the work, and I wasn't prepared internally to receive the gifts from the universal that were right there for me, right?
Yeah.
And once I started doing that, everything just started falling into place. And that's one of the hardest things that for me, because I want everyone around me to start having the same amount of success in life as I am. But, again, people, it's their journey, and they have to be willing to like step into that space and take the accountability and all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
all we can do is lead by example, and hopefully, by energy, bring these people into our space and support them. And it is, I love, and I don't even know, we haven't even talked about this. I think we've a little bit, the whole TMIC principle, the most important conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? What is the most important conversation that you are choosing not to have with yourself? That is
Mm-hmm.
that is holding you back from taking that next step in success, whatever it is. What is that conversation that you're choosing to try and stuff away in the closet and
Mm-hmm.
not address in life? And
Mm-hmm.
for me, and I hear it from my wife all the time. I mean, heck, when you and I met, I couldn't sustain a relationship, and now I've
Mm-hmm.
got one of the most amazing partners in the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And she gets to hear a lot of our calls and stuff, and she's like, "It is amazing to listen to you guys talk on a phone call." She's like, "If you guys could somehow get TMIC, the principles of TMIC, to every person on the planet, this would look really, really different." And I said,
Yeah.
well, the reality is we only need to get 1% every now and then and continue to build on that 1%.
Yeah.
And we'll start making a change, right?
Well, the reason it works is because it's not topic related. So nothing wrong with, going to a conference or a workshop or taking a course or something about a topic that you're interested in. You want to learn how to do something better, than that's around a specific topic, then maybe you need to take that course, whether it's building something or designing something, or learning about business. Maybe you're creating a business. There's things you need to learn about business, to do it well, finance and accounting and marketing. So I'm not saying there isn't anything to learn. That's just not our interest. What we're doing with TMIC is we are interested in the source of who you are and where you're coming from and what you're bringing to anything that you choose to do. So it's really about tapping into your own internal power and realizing that not only are you powerful, but that all of us are individually so powerful that we are the creators of the life that we're living. And we're either creating by design or by default. We don't realize it when it's by default. It's usually we're just kind of assuming that we're caught up in the momentum of life, and things just happen to us like we're in a river, we're just being carried downstream, but we forgot we can swim. And we can swim to the shore, and we can choose if we want to stay in that river, if we want to go to a different one. So yeah, take any courses, that you want, but what our work will be about is about you first having the most important conversation with yourself. And then there's going to have to be conversations with other people, because it's through conversation that human beings co-create reality. Our socially constructed reality is the result of communication with one another. And so you're in a relationship you don't love. How did you get there? You obviously said yes. You had a conversation and said, yes, I'm going to be in this relationship, whether you're married or not. You might have thought, well, I felt cajoled into it. I didn't really want it, but she made me feel. Yeah. See, already it's like people are making you feel something. So you're not taking responsibility. And so you said yes, you're not taking responsibility for saying yes. And now you're in a relationship that dogs you and you don't want to be in. And it's victim, victim, victim. And the
You're
only way out of
complaining.
it is to stop it. I'm just using that as an example. Could be a job, could be friendship, could be your health. It could be, well, I can't help it. I just can't stop eating that stuff. Okay. So you're a victim, and, the ice cream is marching out of the freezer to your couch and is jamming itself down your throat. You have no say in it. Right. So, I mean, like, if people really start to think about the fact that they actually are powerful, I mean, you're denying yourself your authentic power when you say someone made me, or I can't, or, oh, but it's because of this, that, and the other thing. All you're saying is you're not powerful. That's really what I hear.
Yeah.
And so all our work is about is not learning these different things about different subject matter, but rather learning about, I guess if there's one subject matter we're teaching is you. You're learning about you. You're digging into who you are, what the essence of your power is, and what you can do as a creative individual to create a life by design that you love, as opposed to tolerating a life by default.
Right. And that's, I mean, like, again, hitting the nail on the head right there is, you know, what you said is we're teaching people about them. Right. And if we reflect back on when you and I met, my excuse was I had lost my identity. I didn't know
Yeah.
who I was.
Yeah.
Right. I was so lost. And, you know, for the listeners, like, I mean, you're more than welcome to reach out to me sometime and I'll tell you more details. But when I say lost, my life was an absolute disaster. Like,
Mm.
you know, alcoholic, addict, victim. I mean, I was in trouble with the law, like everything you could possibly think of under the sun. My health was bad. My doctor was telling me if I didn't make some changes, it's going to get worse. Like, I checked every box on the freaking list of things going wrong in my life.
Yeah.
And TMIC helped me learn who I was and the power that I truly still had inside me to really create the life I wanted by design. And I did that, right? And I continue to do that, and stop making the excuses and stop blaming everyone else, and just taking that accountability. Because again, what got me into that dark space was whining and complaining.
Yeah.
Taking zero accountability. It's not my fault.
Yeah.
Why should, and I mean, I joke with my wife now, right? She's funny. Like, she and I are so similar, and I love her to death. I'm so grateful to her. But anytime something goes wrong in the house or something's left out, I'll be like, babe, you left that out. She's like, no, you left it out. And I'm like, you don't want me to take accountability for that, do you? Just joking around, right? But that's reality. Even some of the small things, right? Just even taking some accountability for some of the small things in your life. We got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. We should
Because
turn it into a game. Like for couples, it's like, see how many things you can take accountability for in the day.
right,
You know, even if they clearly it's their thing,
yeah,
own it, right?
right,
And just see how that shifts the energy. You know,
yeah,
play a game like that. It could be kind of a fun game to play.
yeah. The accountability game.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fun game. Well, anything else you want to cover around the mind of a champion, Bill? I mean, I think we've covered a lot here, and your story is really phenomenal in terms of an example of someone who reached a mountain peak, fell down the valley, and now is climbing back up the mountain peak because you already, in a way, maybe you weren't taught it the same way that we teach it in TMIC, but the principles are not like we didn't invent them. These are principles that are just principles in how human beings live a life of power. And when you're an Olympic athlete or any kind of athlete, the coaches that work with you, that's what they're there to do. They're there to sort of be on the sidelines, observing you and sort of helping you course correct and direct, because we all have blind spots. We all are. There are things that are invisible to us in our life that we just can't see. And so, the coaches that you worked with were able to kind of develop you as a person as well as develop you as an athlete. There's a very strong connection between the physical development of the body and the relationship to the mind and the discipline that's required to make those things sync up and work together. And so you kind of already dabbled in that. And I'm sure maybe a lot of listeners and viewers have had their own maybe micro experiences, or maybe there's some athletes watching, but we're not superhuman. And so we can lose connection to ourselves. We can feel disconnected to ourselves. Life happens. And sometimes we find ourselves caught in, the momentum of the river, so to speak. But at some point, you either are going to go over the edge of the waterfall and die, or you're going to pick up you're by your bootstraps, so to speak, and swim to shore and rebuild your life. And that's what we're interested in, is helping people rebuild their life. So it's a life by design that they love, and where they take full responsibility and accountability for. And really, I would say it's ultimately about you becoming a powerful person,
Yeah.
And so it seems like when you were, last question I have for you, I guess, is when you were going through all of that, letting go of stuff. Don't know, but I'm assuming there were maybe people in your life you had to let go of. There were what happened there to create that canvas where you could start fresh again?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I wanted to leave everyone with this kind of last thought, if you will. Again, going back to that time, when you and I met, I was introduced to TMIC, life by design or by default, taking accountability for it. It gave me this thought back then, and I still live by it today, that, I've done a lot of really cool stuff as an athlete, as a human being before TMIC, 3 Olympics, Olympic silver medalist, national championship, world championship, world records, national records. I mean, all sorts of stuff, right? And as I reflect back on that old architecture, right, there's a lot of great stuff with it, but I was like, there's also a lot of bad stuff with it, partying, drinking, and all that stuff. And I'm not telling people what they need to do. I just want to be an example for you on what could be for you.
Right.
But after that a couple of weeks after our first initial call back then, I had this conversation with myself again. And I want to encourage people out there, you have to have these conversations with yourself, period. It's just, that's what's going to help you make it reality. And I was like, okay, I've done a lot of really amazing stuff as someone who wasn't truly in alignment with life. I still was doing some things that just really didn't serve me. And in this next chapter of my life, as I continue again back then to be, start to get in alignment, declutter the negative things, I said, what could I create in my life if I had no more excuses? What would it look like? No excuses. I wake up every day. I live life 100% by design. There's a point to everything I do when I wake up. I don't have the excuses of, and I'm going to say it because that's where I was. Oh, I got a hangover. I can't show up for work, or whatever. I'm sick, or whatever it is, whatever the stuff we tell us. I just said, what would my life look like if I had absolutely no excuses? Again, for those listening, doesn't mean I don't have excuses sometimes, but they're far less than they used to be.
Yeah.
And when I had that mindset, and I was like, man, you already have a lot of, like you said, I already have a lot of the tools from going from homelessness to Olympics. So what if I took all these tools that I've acquired over time, and then I took this TMIC principles to heart, zero excuses, what could I create? And I'm living that life right now. Like, it's been absolutely phenomenal on where I am, what I'm doing. I'm dictating when I want to retire from the quote unquote grind.
Right.
Obviously, you and I have talked heavily about, like, when I'm done with some of the grind of the stuff I'm doing, it's full blown TMIC. You and I will probably be next door neighbors or whatever. But I realized that I had a choice, and I've got this magical life that could either be magical, or I could keep being the guy that's complaining and whining about everything in life, and things aren't going this way, and it's my boss's fault, or working for whatever those excuses are, right? I was like, I don't want that anymore. I want to take 100% accountability for my own life and see what I could create with the tools and resources and people around me. And I did, like you mentioned, in that question, when I had to start decluttering, it was people, places, and things. And let me really, really emphasize the people thing. People also included family members of mine that I had to declutter, people that I thought were my best friends that I had to declutter, because reality, they were my drinking and partying buddies, didn't serve me. And so I really had to address the hardest things that were hard for me to let go. But as I look back now, it was the very best thing for me to do. And now, I'm living a life by design, as much as in alignment. And again, I want people to remember, back then, I thought all the stuff that we do now was woo-woo. The whole, I mean, for those that are listening, as a team, we're studying, we're doing meditation in the morning. Never would have thought myself doing that stuff. But again, when I gamify it, because that's what really makes sense for me as a former athlete, when I gamify it, I'm like, that's another tool for my toolbox for me to be better in alignment and lead a life by design. And now I'm to the point where, again, don't get me wrong, I still have thoughts that show up ideas, and I recognize them, and I just don't let them control my life any longer because I'm in control.
Yeah.
And like, okay, I know if I start to drink or whatever, it's going to take me down a path that I don't want to go. I've already been there. Don't want to go back there again.
Right.
And so why continue to abuse myself again when I'm the one doing it?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was, it wasn't easy. It hasn't been easy, but the reward is going to be so much greater than what the life was in the old architecture.
Yeah. And just one final comment, because I do want to address this so people don't get the wrong idea, but you're right when you're accurate when you say it. So when we talk about, decluttering our life, sometimes there are people in our life that are not aligned with who we authentically are and who we want to be in the world. That doesn't always mean, sometimes it means that you have to completely ostracize and extricate them from your life. Not always. You have to decide that, right? Sometimes what I've seen happen is someone will say, well, I have this friend who maybe has been my friend for 15, 20 years or whatever, drinking buddy, like you were saying, right? So they're not aligned with who I am designing myself to be. I don't want to be that person anymore because that person has created the life that I'm trying to get out of. So I don't want to hang out with this person anymore, but you don't just want to cut someone out necessarily. Like sometimes you have to, but if you don't have to, it can create an opportunity for you to share and to say, look, this isn't what I'm committed to anymore. I'm cleaning up things. I want to create a life that looks like this. And you don't often have to tell these people, don't call me anymore. They often just will stop calling you because if they're not aligning with who you're becoming, they're going to find you boring, they're uninteresting, all of this kind of stuff. And when we talk about decluttering, it's not, I just don't want people to get in their head that, oh, now I have to get rid of everyone in my life and call them and tell them never to call me again. That's not what we're talking about. Although sometimes if it's abusive and really destructive, that's necessary. We're just saying that you have to be willing, as you change and design yourself into who you want to be, you have to be willing to accept that one of the consequences may be that people will just leave your life because they're confronted by you. They don't align with you. They just want to keep doing what you did with them in the past, and you're not doing that anymore. So they find you boring, like whatever the reason is, they will declutter themselves. And if they won't, and it's really destructive, yes, sometimes you have to say, look, this isn't really a good fit. I don't think we should remain friends. If it's a family member, that can become a little bit sticky, but you still sometimes got to do what you got to do if you're really committed to creating your own life by design. But here's the thing I'll say. When you speak the truth from who you're creating yourself to be and designing yourself to be, when you speak the truth to someone, they may not like it in the moment, but don't rob them of the opportunity to reflect on what you said a year, 5 years, or 10 years down the road. And I'm telling you, it's happened to me so many times. People that I've said, it doesn't work out, or maybe they just stopped calling me because I've changed too much or whatever. And then I get a call from them, often years later, apologizing. I see what you're saying now. Do you have any suggestions? And sometimes they don't call, or maybe they just haven't yet. And I'm still going to get calls in the future. But don't rob them of the opportunity to see you show up in your power, and that will help change their thinking and their perspective. And it may not be immediately, but we're all interconnected. So even when you don't think you're having an effect on someone, you are. And that goes vice versa, which is why we have to clean our space up. Because if you're hanging on to that person who's your party friend or whatever, and you choose that's not the life you want to live anymore, and everything's your choice, then and yet you still hang out with that person, well, you're still allowing that person's influence into your life, whether you think you are or not. So it goes both ways. But I just wanted to be clear about that, because it can sound a little cold sometimes to say, oh, I have to declutter people. no, we care about people, but we just don't want people in our space that are not aligned with who we're creating ourselves to be, because it's going to make it that much harder to accomplish. And we're robbing them of the opportunity to learn from our experience and perhaps even start to nudge at the edges of maybe I want to design my own life. Maybe I can do this. When you lead by example, there's one of the principles of power is don't tell people what you're doing, show them. That's way more effective, to show them. And so, let them see you. And if they don't like it, they're just not going to call anymore. That's probably what's going to happen. But
yeah, no, I would 100% agree. Just for the listeners too, like what I'd like them to understand is like, I was as far in a deep, dark hole as you could possibly get. Right. And there were some people that I literally just had to cut off. And there were some people that I just eventually transitioned away from, right? Like you said, they will kind of exit themselves out. And I still see some of these people every now and then, and I'll go up and give them a hug and say hi and ask them how they're doing. Most of them are still doing exactly what they were doing 5 years ago. That's their story. That's their journey. I wish them the best. But for me, because my personality is massive, powerful action, I didn't want to extend my runway of figuring out all this stuff when I knew I could literally figure it out much, much sooner than later. But again, don't forget too, like you're kind of mentioning, Chad, right? This is your story and your journey, and it's not gonna be just like mine, right? And so you have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, okay, what needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Well, Bill, thank you so much for sharing your journey and the ups and downs that you've gone through, so that we can learn from that, and really, what it takes to have the mind of a champion. And one of the things it does take is the ability to rebound when you've fallen down. And none of us are immune from having those periods in life where we fall down. But it's not about whether you fall down that defines whether you're a champion or not. So whether you get back up, as they say, right?
Yep.
And so this is a way for people who are feeling down and out. Don't beat yourself out about it. Start to take some responsibility, take some accountability. And it's not a blame thing. It's not a shame thing. It's just, you are powerful. You're just not tapped into it. You're not connected to it right now. And that's what we're here to help do with the most important conversations. So for any of you who want more information, go to tmicglobal.com or themostimportantconversations.com. Check out some of the stuff that we're doing there. In particular, this program is called Whole Life Architecture that we're kind of talking about today. And it is a program designed to help you connect to the authentic person that you are, your power, and to build a life by design and not by default. Bill, thanks so much again for joining us. And to everyone watching and listening, we'll see you next time on another episode of The Most Important Conversations. Until then, bye-bye.
That concludes this episode of The Most Important Conversations. This in-depth conversation could set you on the path to self-improvement, which is essential if you want to be an effective leader and take meaningful action in your life. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of these stimulating discussions, you can find them at tmicglobal.com. Remember, the world is at a crossroads right now. You can't afford to waste this opportunity to take charge of your life, build meaningful relationships with others, and co-create a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.